I jump out of the front seat of the vehicle, start yelling at them to put their weapons down, and they decide not to do that. So we get into a shootout from feet away. They're piling out, and they had stuffed. There's like a clown car. The cab and the rear cab of the truck must have had 8 or 10 little thin Taliban in it. So they're trying to pile up, but they're getting stuck in the concertina wire. They're trying to shoot. We're shooting them. And then out of nowhere, big burst of flame erupts from the bed of the truck.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served Warzone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. Today we have round one of a fascinating Combat Story interview with John Dailey, a former Marine Force Recon operator who was one of the very few selected to stand up what was known then as Detachment One, and which would lead to the creation of the Marine Force's Special Operations Command, or MARSOC, that we know today. The 86-man Detachment One was formed with a 2-year charter to train and deploy as a proof of concept to assess the viability of a larger Marine Special Operations contribution to the GWOT. Commanding Officer Colonel Robert J. Coates, a Marine Force Recon legend, was given his pick of personnel, and one of the 4 team leaders he selected was Gunnery Sergeant John Dailey. Their sole stipulation in finding the right recruits was that they be, quote, tough, rugged bastards with strong backs and hard feet, end quote. We know they got it right because we've interviewed some of those early warriors on this show, like Elliot, Ackerman, and Jason Lilley, to name just a few. John has written a book that will be released in August 2024, aptly titled Tough Rugged Bastards, a memoir of a life in Marine Special Operations that describes both John's experiences and the beginning of MARSOC from his perspective on the ground. I hope you enjoy this experience of combat and the weight of the Marine Corps on the shoulders of a small group of men like John as much as I did. And stay tuned next week for round 2, where we complete John's story. John, thanks so much for taking the time to share your story with us today.
Happy to be here, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
So, for those who are listening and can't see your backdrop, this is one of the better ones I've seen in a long time. You got a couple of the paddles, I think they're called, on the back wall.
Yeah.
You got the globe, you got some books up. But you do have what looks like to me some type of a bearskin rug on the chair behind you, and I was hoping we could start there.
Yeah, no, I have... It's actually a kangaroo pelt. I guess it would be called a pelt. A gift from the Australian Special Operations guys. And, I continue, even though I've been retired for quite some time now, I work for the Marine Raiders, training them, and get to, through extension, to work with a lot of partners. And so that does bring up one thing I've been told, that I'm required to notify everyone that my opinions are strictly my own and do not represent U.S. SOCOM or MARSOC or anyone else.
Perfect. So I'm sure we'll get into your travels all over the globe, to include the kangaroo pelt. But what I wanted to read to people is a quick communication you and I had as we were confirming for today, because I felt like this couldn't have been said by anybody but a Marine. So I said, hey, it's July 4th. I'm reaching out just to set up, make sure we're still connected and ready to go for our interview. I'm really looking forward to it. Your response, very quick, by the way, was, thanks for the email. I hope you get out and blow some shit up to celebrate your freedom today. Looking forward to it. Talk to you soon. And I just felt like if anything says Marine, it's a response like that. And I just loved hearing it.
Well, we do like to blow shit up.
Yeah, exactly. Especially on the 4th of July. So with that in mind, John, I know we're going to talk about your background, but I also wanted to just seed this book, the title, with people, because I think it also rings true of the Marine Corps, Tough Rugged Bastards, a memoir of a life in Marine Special Operations. So my first question here, I think, is, you've been in combat, you've stood up, you've helped stand up MARSOC, and you've written this book. Was the book harder to write than it was to go downrange?
Absolutely. I found a lot of things are harder than going downrange. After my retirement, I went to school to kind of learn how to write. I got into a Master of Fine Arts writing course program at University of North Carolina, and walking into that classroom the first time with a bunch of 20-something, 30-something, former English majors, and it was the scariest thing I've ever done. I've patrolled streets in Fallujah and Najaf, all over Iraq, and I would rather have been there 100 times rather than to walk into a classroom and try to pass myself off as a writer. So it's yeah, I mean the act of writing, the grind of writing is definitely one of the tougher things that I've accomplished in my life. So
Well,
I'm proud of it.
congrats. Yeah, congrats on doing it. And the book sounds fantastic. I actually wanted to kick this off with Colonel Robert Coates. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's right. Yes,
Features prominently. Could you share who he is in this story?
certainly. So let's see. When I got to First Force Recon Company, I'd spent a little time as a sniper, some time in the infantry, and some different places. But when I got there, very shortly after, Colonel Coates came to be our commanding officer. He was lieutenant colonel at the time, but he had a just a no nonsense guy. It was all about the mission, and that's the way the unit was run. And that was I wasn't a young guy at the time. I was an E5. I'd been around for a little while, but it was still kind of my formative years, I think, in special operations. And, coming into that kind of environment where it was just all about the mission all the time was hugely impactful, beneficial. A couple of years passed and he moved on. I came back from the deployment where we went to Afghanistan in 2001, and he pulled me over to teach and be a sniper instructor at a place called Special Operations Training Group. I worked for him for a little bit there, and then one day he came in out of the blue and said, "Hey, have you heard the rumors about this new unit, the Marine Corps SOCOM unit that's going to form?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've heard rumors, but nobody knows anything about it." And he's like, "Well, I do because I'm in charge of it. Do you want in?" And that's, hell yeah. I couldn't say yes fast enough. So, even though we had known each other, worked with each other for, over a couple of tours, he brought me in and said, "Hey, if you're going to be a team leader, you know what I expect. I expect excellence, compromises, mission failure. You're every day you were kind of fighting for your job, right? If you
Wow.
did not do well, it was, no matter how much you liked you were likely to be gone. And that was, like I said, the environment that really kind of nurtured the sort of people that we had around us. And but he pulled me into his office and said, "Hey, I'm going to let you pick your own team." And really it was a crazy, unique opportunity. He was able to kind of look throughout the Marine Corps and say, "I want this guy, this guy." I got two guys who had gotten out. We got a hold of them, said, "Hey, you want to come back in?" And they're like, "Yeah, for this, I will." So we brought some guys back in. But when I was standing there in front of his desk, and this was a guy, he had been down to South America in the early days in the 80s, Nicaragua, and doing stuff, and worked some with the agency. Just had this huge pedigree, but he's like, "Hey, my only stipulation on the guys that you pick is that they're tough, rugged bastards with strong backs and hard feet." And I walked out of the office right then. I was like, "Hey, if I ever write a book," and I had, some plans far in the back of my head. If I ever write a book, it will be called Tough, Rugged Bastards. So I finally got to kind of make that come true.
So that phrase came from Coates.
Yes, it did.
Interesting. And it's so
And
well
it was
put.
it was something that he said quite frequently. But even when I talked with the publisher, the first time and said, "Hey, the book title is Tough Rugged Bastards," they pushed back a little bit. They were like, that might throw some people off or turn some people off, audience wise, or bookstores, may I don't know what bookstore would be reluctant to have the word bastards,
Yeah.
emblazoned. But they're like, "Hey, you want to come up with some alternates?" So I think, "Yeah, I really don't, man. If we're going to do this thing, there's one title, and it's been in the back of my head for 20 years now." So
That is great. So just before we jump to your background, John, can you help spell out the difference between when we hear MARSOC, Recon, Raiders? Obviously, folks in the Marine Corps know this well. For those who are listening who aren't as familiar, if they start hearing these terms, how should they think about these different organizations?
all right, absolutely. So the Raiders, the Marine Raider, were initially formed in World War II. They only existed for a short period of time, a couple of years, but they were America's first special operations unit before the SEALs, before the Green, Army Special Forces. Um, but they only lived for a little while. After 2 years, they were disbanded. And what kind of grew out of that was the amphibious reconnaissance that later became Reconnaissance Battalion and Force Reconnaissance that are in the Marine Corps today. And their jobs are generally to work behind enemy lines, to do reconnaissance, find out information for the commander. Um, and that was Force Recon was kind of the pinnacle of the Marine Corps for most of the time that I was in. But post 9/11, the decision was made that there needed to be more special operations forces, and the Marine Corps had bowed out the first time in 1987 when U.S. Special Operations Command was formed. This time they weren't given a choice, although they still tried to fight back a little bit, and the U.S. Special Operations Command uh, wasn't really pushing for it either. They're like, hey, let the Marines go do the Marines thing. But it was Secretary Donald Rumsfeld who's like, no, you guys are going to do this. The nation's going to need it. So there was the decision that they would form a test bed organization, a proof of concept unit that was only going to exist for 2 years. We wound up existing for 3, but it was called Detachment One, and that was formed. About a third of us were Force Reconnaissance Marines. About a third of us were Intel Marines, and the remaining third kind of ran the gamut from communications and administration, logistics, fires type guys, JTACs. And we were small. We were only about initially 89, and I think we deployed with maybe 100. So that proof of concept validated the requirement for a Marine special operations component, so which became MARSOC. So now when you hear Marine Raiders, that's what that's talking about. MARSOC and the Marine Raiders are synonymous. MARSOC was started with it essentially enveloped the two force reconnaissance companies in the States, the first and second. So really, all of your Force Recon Marines moved over and became, or most of them became MARSOC. And since then, the Marine Corps is reconstituted. So they have a reconnaissance battalion and a force reconnaissance company.
When you hear people who are part of Force Recon today, is that synonymous with special operations or no?
They do special operations. They are not a part of U.S. Special Operations Command.
Got it.
So and that's kind of always been the distinction. The jobs are really the same, and for all of those years, from the time everybody was formed between World War II, Korea, especially in Vietnam, was kind of a hotbed for special operations development. Force Recon and SEALs and Green Berets all had their own missions, but they were all on a very even playing field. And in 1987, when U.S. Special Operations Command formed, kind of everybody moved over to the big house, except for the Marines. And so we continued to fill the role as the Marine Corps commanders on the ground's eyes and ears.
Is the relationship between kind of MARSOC and Force Recon a positive one? Is there competition there? They kind of feed each other, so maybe they're closer now. How does that look today?
I think it's positive now. We have we have different operational environments, right? So it's not a negative relationship by any means. We do have quite frequently, Marines from Recon, Force Recon will come try out and come to MARSOC. So it's almost a progression. Where we'll get a lot of folks from there. We don't send them back nearly as much as I think would be beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, like I said, my upbringing and my love will always be for the Force Recon Marines, because that's where I grew up and kind of learned everything that I know.
That's a perfect segue. So yeah, how did you find your way just to the Marine Corps to begin with?
So I grew up in my father had served in the Navy on a sub tender, like during Vietnam, but not, in the the waters, I guess, around it. I had an uncle who was a special Green Beret, but didn't talk about it. I found a picture of him with a MACV-SOG patch, and I was like, you got to tell me about this. And he would never talk about it. So I've always been kind of left, and even to my father and my other uncle, he'd never really talked to them about it. So I was always left wondering. So, but not from a huge military family or any requirement that I would join. I just I think a lot of where I grew up, kind of in Virginia, the Virginia West Virginia border. Growing up in the hills and the mountains. In the middle of nowhere. So, a lot of time outside, a lot of time. So the idea of going to school after I didn't have to anymore was unappealing. The idea of, and my grades didn't support that anyway, nor did our finances. So, getting out of school, the options there were going to work at a Corning factory where they made Corning plates and things, or there's a big applesauce factory. And there was some other things you could do, but that if you did without a degree, that was kind of it. And neither of those were appealing. So we moved, my parents got divorced, and I wound up moving right as I was starting high school. And the place we moved, and I had known about the Marine Corps and since I was a kid, and had indicated that I wanted to do it, but I wound up going into the little strip mall, the recruiter's office, and it was right about the time that I had read the book Rambo, and then the movie was coming out, and I learned about the Green Berets, and so I wanted to go in and talk to the Army recruiter, and I've heard this happen 1,000 times, but he was out to lunch.
No, this happens so often.
It does. So down the end of the hall, this guy leans over and he's like, he's out to lunch or whatever. He's like, come in. So I go in, and this guy was a Force Recon Marine. He had spent his, and I told him, I'm like, I watched Rambo. I want to be a Green Beret. And he's like, have you heard of Force Recon? I'm like, no, I haven't. And he's like, starts taking me around and showing me like this pictures of them free falling on the wall and his sniper school photo. And I'm like, you know what? I'm sold. So from that day on, I was, there was everything that I did was, from the sports that I played to, the things I studied and read was like just to prepare me for going to boot camp and to get into Force Recon.
How amazing is that? Literally, the guy's out to lunch. It changes the entire trajectory of your life.
That happens more frequently. I mean, I hear that story.
Yeah.
I've heard it at least a dozen times. So I don't, maybe the Army recruiter ought to stay at work a little longer or a little more, or bring a lunch, pack a sandwich. I don't know.
I gotta say, I've never heard the opposite. I've never heard the Marine Corps recruiter was out to lunch and the Army guy was there and grabbed the recruit as a result. Oh, that's great. So is there any discussion with your folks as you're signing up, or is it just you're set on this, you're going?
I was set. I think I had been talking about it and this was ninth grade when I came home. This recruiter is a Force Recon guy. I'm joining. So
you went there in ninth grade?
Oh yeah.
To the recruiter's office?
And he was, in it, to his credit, he was super cool. They had, he led like the camping trips and, trips to the base where we'd go shoot, M16s and, do cool stuff. So, he let me, even though he knew that, hey man, this kid's got 4 years before he's going to, or 3 at least, before he'll be able to even sign up. He let me tag along, and obviously I took out his trash quite a bit and washed his car, but it was kind of like Mr. Miyagi. I learned some things along the way, and he moved on, and we got a new guy. But by that point, I was sold. And when it came time for my mom to sign, there was no. She knew, that it was happening one way or the other.
It's pretty amazing. He didn't even get the credit for, as far as like the quotas that they have to meet to bring people in. He didn't even get that from you, and he still brought you along for years.
Yeah, no, his name was Staff Sergeant Shirley, and he was just a really great guy. I taught me a ton. He, one of the coolest pictures that he had on his wall was a sniper school picture, and there's notoriously Marine Corps sniper school classes are very, very small, and the class is standing there. There's only like about 6 of them, and they're in ghillie suits, with their rifles. And I was like, that is, I'm going to have that picture on my wall, and it's hanging up there. So
It's awesome.
he definitely like set a standard for me to, and push me. He would
Yeah.
always give me, hey, read this and prepare, or watch the show, or a movie. Um, so he gave me a lot, absolutely a lot of encouragement, and was, I mean, the epitome of both what a reconnaissance Marine should be and a recruiter, and I guess a Marine in general.
What an amazing mentor to have. So I assume that he got you on a track that was rifleman, putting you on a path to get that picture one day. Do you go in as you're going into the infantry straight in?
Yeah. Yeah. I go in, boot camp, go to infantry school, and it's actually a funny story that another one of the, I think we all do, but when you look back and say that there are certain times that definitively, steered the course of your life in one direction or another. So I report in, gone to boot camp in Parris Island, South Carolina, gone to infantry school in Camp Lejeune, just down the road here, but then was sent to California. So I arrived in California when I finally get, a truck drives up and dumps us off with our sea bags at our unit. We walk in and present our orders to check in, and we were all checking into weapons company. And that's what the order said. That's where I showed up. But the other Marines that I was with were, machine gunner and mortarmen and people that belonged in weapons company. And regular infantryman, 0311, does not belong in weapons company. So the clerk, was kind of befuddled about what to do with me. He winds up taking me to the first sergeant, and I knew the rank first sergeant. I didn't really, never seen one, I don't think. So this, he knocks on the door, and this guy starts screaming immediately. The guy opens the door, like pushes me in, and it's just full of cigarette smoke and empty coffee cups. And this grizzled dude who is a Vietnam vet just starts yelling at me for 15 minutes before he even asks why he's yelling at me. And I try to explain that, hey, I'm an 0311, and he was like, well, we don't have 0311s in weapons company. I'm like, okay, but I went to 0311 school. That's what they trained me to do. And eventually he decided that the only place they did have 0311s was in the sniper platoon. So this, so he's like, it's going to be easier than getting new orders and having you sent away. I'm going to send you the sniper platoon. And so he yells up for the sniper platoon sergeant, who comes down and immediately starts yelling at me, because in those days, in order to get into the sniper platoon, you spent a couple years in the infantry. You showed that you had promise. Then they hosted a selection event. You would go to that, and if you did really well in that, you would earn your way into the platoon. So I had kind of bypassed all of this unwittingly, but I was also really, really happy about being in the sniper platoon because, like I said, I wanted that fucking picture. So I get immediately thrown into this platoon where everybody hates me. They all want me to fail, and they were in the middle of this kind of like an in-house sniper school. It's like to prepare people to go. So they would see who did the best, and the people who did the best would then get to go to the actual sniper school. And so I was like, the only hope for me is to do really, really well. I had missed the first week of the course, so a lot of the kind of the basics I didn't know, but the one thing I had going for me, I wish I still did, was a really good memory. I could kind of go through, read things and remember them. So like a lot of memorization of definitions and, nomenclature, things like that. But so I spent a lot of time, like I said, in the woods, stalking, hunting, things like that. So I that came pretty naturally to me. I'd done a lot of shooting. So luckily for me, at the end of it, they're tallying up, hey, who did the best? And they're like, holy shit, this kid did. I didn't do the best, but I was in the top two. So that kind of won at least a couple of them over, and they decided to let me stay.
Just a quick word from our sponsor, Mint Mobile, and we'll get right back to this combat story. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. I just re-upped my plan with Mint Mobile, and there were no hidden charges or gotchas. With my other mobile providers, I think I'm paying one amount, and then I'll notice I've got additional charges added on. Mint Mobile is here to help with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan, which I did, along with all your existing contacts. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/combatstory. That's mintmobile.com/combatstory. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/combatstory. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speeds slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. And now, back to this combat story. I have to assume over time you become part of this unit. Like they bring you in and embrace you.
Eventually, yeah. Eventually, we went on deployment, and kind of over that 6-month kind of deployment to Okinawa and different places. We bonded, and I came back from that and was the guy that should have been next to get the opportunity to go to sniper school. And then the Marine Corps, in its infinite wisdom, decided that it was going to disband our unit.
Oh,
so the entire and they actually renamed another unit. They changed the organizational colors basically. So another unit, we were 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. Another unit became 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, and we essentially ceased to exist. So we were all told to go find a job. So I went from the point of like next in the chute to go to sniper school to, I may not even get to go to another sniper platoon. So I'm just working the telephones, calling everybody like, hey, do you have any openings? Is there any way I can get over there? And wound up making my way to the 5th Marines. And they had a regimental scout platoon. And from there, I was able to get a quota, get to sniper school, and kind of realize that dream that I had.
Jeez. Right on the edge too. So, you mentioned you grow up shooting and you're in the woods quite a bit. How much of that did you have to unlearn, if any, to become a better sniper? Or does all of that just provide additive value?
No, that's a good question. I don't think I've ever thought about it quite like that, but I mean, I absolutely did have some bad habits, that I needed to get rid of. I think just through the sheer volume of repetition, those bad habits kind of get forced out, without you really thinking about them.
Mm-hmm.
One of the hardest ones for me was, when you're in a prone shooting position. We were always told the snipers keep their heels flat, flat and inboard so that your heels aren't sticking up. And that takes a little bit of doing to get accustomed to laying that way for hours and hours at a time when you're observing or shooting or whatever. And then that was certainly not something that was ever a consideration when I was hunting, with my dad or uncles. But that was something for me that I would always get. They would come and step on your ankles, and eventually you'd realize that if you didn't want that to happen, you needed to learn.
Jeez. Well, I am curious when it comes to sniper school. We've had a couple of Marine snipers on here, clearly, but I don't know if I've ever really asked if there's a particular part of that training course that ends up pushing more people out, or that is particularly difficult. You mentioned laying in one place for several hours.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure getting accustomed to that is difficult. But is there a part in the course where you look back and you're like, that part right there, that's a real ball buster, that weeds a lot of people out?
Yeah, I think there are really two big attrition areas, and the first one is stalking, and that's you get essentially dropped off a vehicle, and you're told that, hey, the target is 1,000, 2,000 meters that way. So you've got to, and the target will be a couple of instructors sitting in the back of a truck with binoculars, and they know that you can't go, any further right than this, any further left than this. They know what time you start and they know where you have to get to. So your responsibility is to get within 200 meters without being seen, get to a position where you can observe them, through your scope, using a blank, take a shot, and then, you know, another instructor will walk over and basically set on the radio while they're, looking. And so they'll direct them. They're like, hey, take 2 steps left, it's 1 step right. There's a sniper at your feet. And there is or there isn't. So once they've kind of scoured the area for you, then you have to take a second shot. And that's where a lot of people, because there is the muzzle blast that comes with a blank. And a lot of times you'll be seen then. So you've got to do this exercise like 10 or 12 times throughout the course. You have to, the scoring rubric, and you have to do well enough at it that you pass. So people have a challenge with that, and then the shooting itself are really kind of like the two big attrition areas. And then there are other reasons people get hurt, or people will have there's parts like mission planning. You have to write patrol orders and things like that. And sometimes people won't get that. But for the most part, it's really those kind of skills. And that's, in the last stock, the last opportunity, it's there's some people who are really, really crossing themselves and doing whatever they can, like begging
Sure.
other people for help. And then shooting is the other one. I mean, we shot out to 1,000 meters, moving targets out to 800, or targets that would like come up and down. And this was 89. So, at the time there have been some significant advances in a lot of things since then, but it was, really at the time that I went, and that was the reason that units ran their internal training, because you kind of needed to be ready to pass. It was really more of the confirmation that yeah, you can do everything. It wasn't really a school where they were there to teach you. You were expected to show up already knowing everything. So it was, I think my class started with like 24 and we finished with about 10.
Wow. That is a significant amount. Did I hear you correctly, John? You said that for the second shot you take in that stalking exercise, they should not be able to see the muzzle flash?
Right. Well, if they do, then you're done. So you really have to work. And once you start to understand it, you start to understand that you've got to build kind of layers of vegetation in front of you, or find, a window that allows you to see through multiple bushes. And if you can nail that, that's really the trick. Once
interesting.
Once you kind of see that, you can see it in your mind, then you start to see it as you're approaching, as you're crawling, it on
starts
your face,
forming.
You're like, oh yeah. You're like, okay, right over there, I should be able to find a place to get a window.
Oh, so, and you mentioned, this is 1989. Can you give us an idea of what the Marine Corps is like at that time? Like, what's the focus? What's morale like? How does it feel being in the Marine Corps that time?
It was, and I definitely think I have a little bit of a skewed view, because the sniper platoon was kind of a cut above, so a little more motivated guys, but there was, it was far enough post Vietnam where it was really the more senior guys who were there, and people that you weren't allowed to talk to, or had very little reason to ever talk to. So it wasn't like we were really dealing with the immediately post Vietnam of a lot of drugs and things like that. But it was still a bit of a problem. But we hadn't been it had been a peacetime military for almost 20 years at that point. So there was well, not 20 years, but 10. Budgets had kind of been cut, so there was a lot of training, and it continued that way up to 2001. Really, what you would go to the bar and brag about was like how hard the training exercise that you did,
probably being in sniper platoon, like going through the sniper course and successfully completing it. It's huge.
So yeah, going to schools, if you kind of this thing, you were always trying to pad your resume, learn new things, go to new schools, and then that, hey, we went out. I mean, it's the standard kind of template for the week in the infantry during that time was, you'd get up on Monday morning, early, hike out maybe 10 or 15 miles to someplace, kind of set up your base camp, and you would just do stuff all week. You do patrols, very little actual shooting. I mean, really, the snipers, we were fortunate that was one of the places where you got ammo. Um, Very even blank ammo. There's a lot of run around saying, butter, butter, butter jam. But So a lot of that, and then you would march, hike back on usually Thursday afternoon. You get back in time to clean everything up, and quite often they would be like, "Hey, take off Friday, take off Saturday, come back Sunday. We'll start packing your gear, and we'll do it all again." And we would do that 3 weeks a month, and then the fourth week, kind of maintenance. So it was not a bad life, for a guy with, unmarried, and most of the people that it seemed like at that time were, I mean, very few people had cars, we had nothing, there was really, and there's like a beauty in that, like everything that you own, you can stuff into a sea bag, throw it on your back and go.
Yeah.
Like I was like envious of my roommate had a Walkman, and we had like some speakers that he could plug into it. That was kind of like the height of technology
Yep.
at the time.
I feel like those are good days. Did you ever end up doing time in, I'm going to call it the regular infantry. So if people from the Marine Corps, please don't get mad at me, but anything outside of the sniper platoon and force recon, do you actually go back to a regular infantry unit?
I didn't. So
What?
no. I, like I said, totally lucked out getting put in the sniper platoon
Wow.
initially. Um, then moved to that other place, the Regimental Scouts. While I was there, and right after I had gone to sniper school, um, I realized that it was kind of monotonous. Our job was to train the other units, and we didn't do that very very much. They were kind of doing their own training, so a lot of sitting around. And we had a party at the barracks one night, or like every night, I guess it was a party at the barracks. But just sitting around drinking beer, and a Marine came over, and we started talking, and he was the career planner, which I didn't. I think they call him like the detailer or whatever in the Army, the guy that's supposed to get you to reenlist, or picks people to fill particular quotas and of duty assignments and things like that. And I didn't know what this guy was, but we started talking, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm a sniper." And he was like, "Man, that's so cool." He's like, "You know what?" He's like, "Yeah, I've got a really good opportunity for you." Hey, he's like, "There's this job in the Marine Corps where you can go work at embassies." And he's like, "Man, but with your reputation, you're a sniper and everything." He's like, "As soon as you get there, the CIA is gonna like have you off whacking people." And I'm a gullible. I mean, let's see, I was probably 8, maybe 19 at this point. I was as gullible as I could be. And so I'm like, "Man, that sounds really cool." Um, so before I know it, the next day I'm signed up for, well, what is Marine security guard duty. Um, I go to the school, and when I get there, it becomes pretty evident pretty quickly that I'm probably not going to be whacking anybody except with like a nightstick.
Yeah.
Um, so the Marine security guards are at embassy, all or almost all embassies around the globe. If you show up, there's usually a Marine there, and the job is security. So you work under the auspice, essentially, of the State Department while you're there. So they're not sending you off on any sorts of top secret or otherwise, missions. There's the CIA is not coming down and recruiting you to do anything for them, really, at least in my experience. But it was a phenomenal time, right? I
Yeah.
went as like I said, I was a sergeant who had been used to hiking out to the field every Monday, eating MREs all week, and the big pleasure of the week was like slamming cheap beer that I wasn't even old enough to drink. Um, Embassy duty, the Marines are like quartered by housed by the State Department, because they don't want you driving, so you have a driver. They don't want you in there fucking up the kitchen, so you have a maid, and that you live in a embassy furnished house that's generally pretty nice.
With the other Marines, right?
With the other Marines. So
Yeah.
you've got anywhere. I was in two relatively small posts, so 8 to 10 Marines.
Where,
I mean,
where were you, John? Can you
I
say?
was, yeah. Yeah, my first duty station was in Budapest. And I
That's
got there
awesome.
yeah, so I got there in '89, right as the wall was coming down. The Soviets were pulling out. It was a really, really neat time to be there. Um, the house that we lived in there was phenomenal. And one of the, if you've traveled, been to a lot of embassies, generally the Marine House is kind of known for having a big bar. Um, I showed up and they're like, "Hey, you're the guy in charge of the bar," so it suited me
Don't mess it up.
pretty
Yeah.
well. Um, but yeah, I mean, great. Usually Friday nights, big parties, particularly in Budapest because it was still considered a bloc country. Um, we weren't allowed to socialize freely with the Hungarians, so it was very tight between the American community, the Brits, the Aussies, the Canadians. Um, so Friday night they'd all be over at our house, having a big party. Saturday night we'd go to the Australian club or the Brit club, and so it was a really it opened my eyes to a lot of things. I was not nearly as gullible when I left.
Yeah.
Kind of got to see how the world works, how the Marine Corps works from a different perspective, how, uh, politics a little bit, works, how how a lot more of the world works dealing with civilians
Yeah.
and people that, I had, not thought I would have any dealings with ambassadors and such. So I
And,
was there first, and then I went to Buenos Aires, which
what?
was yeah, which not well, yeah, it wasn't shabby.
Gosh.
That's too shabby.
I got to say, and I knew this from growing up. You and I talked about this just a little bit before we hit play here, but and other people may have heard me talk about this before on the show. I grew up, obviously, son of a State Department dad, so I grew up in these embassies, and the Marine Corps detachment was very much looked up to. Like they didn't pick just anybody,
Mhm.
and you can attest to this. I'm sure they didn't just want you because you were some person to fill a slot. Like you have to be presentable to senior officials in the US government, like visiting officials, dignitaries, like you are really well regarded. And then that Marine Corps house is where everything happens, especially in the smaller, I shouldn't say smaller, but like place like France, it's different. You got this massive community, but a place like Budapest or Buenos Aires, like that's where people go on the weekends. I watched every Super Bowl as a kid at the Marine Corps house, wherever I
Wow.
was. I just remember it to this day. The pool was amazing. Like it was great.
Yeah, it was absolutely a unique, incredibly unique opportunity. And I had 9/11 not happened, I had really planned to go back on that duty as the kind of the senior guy and just to give my kids the opportunity to grow up like
Hmm.
that. But so I met my wife as I was arriving as a Marine there. She had been there for a couple of months as a school teacher.
In
So she was
Argentina or Hungary?
in Budapest,
Okay.
yeah. And so she was an American school teacher. We hit it off, kind of dated for a while, and then I moved to Argentina. She came to visit. The school there was like, "Hey, you want a job?" So she was like, "Yeah, sure."
That's awesome.
So we've been and you're not allowed if you're one of the watchstanders, the young guys, to be married while you're on the duty because you have to live with everybody else. So we didn't get married until after we left, but I think we're about to hit 32 years here in a next week. So,
Jeez. Congrats. Congrats. Not an easy task. Um,
but
Especially in the line of work you were in, John, like for
yeah,
that,
it
that's
was
rare.
it was really rare in special operations. There was not a lot of looking back on folks that we knew then, guys in my platoon. There's I think there's one other that I know of that's still married. But what happens, and so my end of kind of good luck, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it. I got to Budapest, or I'm sorry, I got to Buenos Aires right as the Gulf War was kicking off. So I was kind of adamant that, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm a sniper. I need to go do work. So they have in the I guess in the military, all across the military, but a thing called a like an administrative action form that you can just request something, And so every day I would come in the embassy and I would just had a photocopy a stack of them and I would fill out one to say I want to leave and I want to go. I want orders to some unit, in Kuwait. And I would turn it in to my boss, and my boss would take it upstairs and put it on the desk of the embassy's regional security officer, who's kind of like our next higher boss. And he would take it and throw it in the trash, I'm sure. But I had been there for only about a month, and President Bush came, and of course, we got the opportunity to meet him, President Bush Senior, and somebody had talked to him, the RSO had talked to him, and we were meeting. We like all get to shake his hand, and the White House photographer takes a picture of each of us, and he's like, "Hey, which one of you's Daly?" And he's like, "Daly." He's like, "Let me tell you, I know you want to go to Iraq or to Kuwait or whatever, but he's like, stop filling up the inboxes with paperwork." And so I got kind of told to stand down from the highest level. So I was like, I guess that's not going to happen.
Was your heart about to jump out of your chest?
It was. I thought it was pretty cool. I'm like, man, that's pretty neat. I mean, that he took the time to, President Bush with everything that was going on, and he he was getting ready to give a press conference, and so everybody was kind of gathered around, and he acted like he was going to start walking, and everybody kind of went into the auditorium, and he came back, and it was just his Secret Service guys, and he was like, "Hey, come here, all the Marines." He's like, "I know you all want to be there. I know you got friends there, and Saddam Hussein's a son of a bitch, but we're going to nail him." And then he turned around and walked off. I'm like, all right, that's really cool.
That is awesome that he had just the wherewithal to talk to y'all about that. I'm sure he had other things on his mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was, always thought that was a highlight really memory.
Cool. Oh, wow. Okay. So this is obviously early 90s. When is it that you make your way into recon?
So I come back from that duty, get sent back to the infantry, but they recognize that I'm a sniper. So they send me, so that now I'm kind of in charge of the sniper platoon. I did that for about a year or so, and while I was there, I was trying to take the selection to get into Force Recon, and I eventually had the opportunity, made it, and then moved from. I was stationed up at 29 Palms, up in the desert of California, down to Camp Pendleton, and so in was it 93 or so, I got to First Force Recon Company. So I was showing up a little bit older. A lot of people were kind of do that very, very early on. I'd been in the Marine Corps 5 or 6 years. I was a sergeant. Been to sniper school. I'd had the opportunity to go to Ranger school and jump school already. So I showed up with a pretty good resume, I guess. But then nobody cares about that, right? You get put right into training, and from the first minute, every day that I was there, I loved. I mean, there was not a day that I wasn't like smiling going to work, because it was just great people, great training, just the opportunities. I loved everything about it.
Wow. You mentioned just prior to that, coming back from your security detachment work overseas and going back to lead a sniper element. How rusty do you get when you haven't been on the gun for a couple of years? I assume you weren't regularly shooting distance rounds at these embassies.
Not at all. Not as much as I would have thought. I kept up, knowledge wise. I took my little notebooks with me and made sure that as I went back, I was ready to go back. But I was fortunate, because when I showed up, the unit did not have any snipers. Like the guys just had not passed the course, or they may have had one. I think they had one. And so it's like, man, I grabbed him, and like, our job is to, get these guys ready, get them to school. And I was kind of told that, hey, we're not going to let you go to even try out for recon unless you get us a crop of snipers. So there was definitely incentive. So we lived out, did just the things I'd learned from before. We'd hike out, we'd live out on the range, we'd shoot as much as we could. We'd practice stalking. From being up in the desert, it's a little challenging. So if we could swing it, we'd go down to Camp Pendleton, hang out for, stay down there for a month or so, just doing the same thing, shooting, stalking, um, having classes, getting the guys spun up. And then, we lucked into we got a pretty large set of quotas. I think we got six or eight of our Marines, which was rare to get that many, but to school, sent them all off. And I think they all came back having graduated. So it was cool. I was like, all right, I'm out of here. So,
See,
I took the selection and went to First Force Recon.
so you mentioned before we hit record, John, that you had crossed paths with Todd Opalski, who a lot of people listening will know from the show, former recon, spent some time in Delta. Do you meet him pre 9/11 or post?
I met him I think. The first time I met him, I feel like I met him like we went to a school or something together when he was enlisted. Because we were in about as I was listening to the
Yeah.
podcast, and he was, about the same time. Yeah, we're about roughly the same age. I believe I met him he was a young enlisted guy, and maybe a sniper, and then as an officer later, after post 9/11.
Interesting. Wow.
And so,
Okay.
Marine Corps
Yeah.
is tiny, so
Yeah.
especially when you kind of get into the specialties of snipers and recon Marines.
I got to imagine, especially in that community. Could you tell us where are you at when 9/11 goes down? Because I know you go down range pretty quickly after that.
Yeah, so it's another one of the oddball, encounters. So I was sitting in a pub called Kitty O'Shea's Irish Pub on Mitchell Street in Darwin, Australia, when it's like 9 p.m. So at this point, I was the platoon sergeant for Force Recon platoon. We were on our routine deployment. We had just left, sailed to Australia, and spent a couple days training with the Australian Special Operations snipers. And we finished up, came back to the boat, cleaned everything up, and told the guys it was our one night out. Told the guys, hey, go out in town, have a good time. And me and the three team leaders that I had, we went out to this Kitty O'Shea's, and kind of a quiet, if there's such a thing as a quiet Irish pub, but just kind of tucked ourselves back into the corner, sitting around drinking beer. And there was a lot of Marines in there, obviously a lot of Aussies. Football or soccer was on. And then sometime after like 9 p.m., the bartender like yells, and we all look up, and it's the one of the first tower, and we're like, fuck, that's this changes everything. We are the Marine Expeditionary Unit. We're like America's 911 force, and we're the guys that are going right. There's like no doubt about that. So almost as soon as that happens, we have Marines and sailors on what's called shore patrol. Like their job is to break up fights and get people out of jail. But they come running down the streets, and they're just sticking their head in every bar, like, get back to the boat, we're under attack. And everybody rushes out. We all stand up, and Willie, one of my team leaders, is looking. We've got like 4 pitchers of beer on the table, and he was like, I don't know, boss. I think it's gonna be a long time before we have any more beer. I'm like, oh. I guess they won't miss us for like another 15 minutes, right? So we finish off our beer, and he was right about that. It was a while. Um, we get back to the boat, and somehow miraculously they were able to, I think, round everybody up. We're talking like 5,000 Marines, 3,000 sailors, who are out drunk all over Australia. Get everybody back, and by the time I woke up, we were at sea.
Wow.
So we just started kind of heading that way by October. We were in Pakistan. So my platoon went ashore there to kind of establish like landing sites and things. And then November, we were in Afghanistan.
Geez. So, you guys went direct. What was the communication like with your wife and family at that
There
point?
wasn't, it was, like I said, it was a bit of a transit, but at that point, I don't, I think there must have been, yeah, we had computers by that point. I I don't think that you could routinely just connect them like in, to the internet. So they were mostly for just like typing lists of names or whatever on. But they did have, I think they had a few that were connected where you could communicate with home. But the bulk of communication was like telephone, like a ship to sea or ship to shore telephone. So you guys were standing in line with a AT&T phone card, like punching in the numbers,
Remember
and
that. Yeah.
and it was and they would shut those off. They'd flip a switch and they would be off. So guys would wait in line for hours and then get screwed. But I was able to talk, briefly with my wife and make sure that they were okay and kind of reassure that like, oh, we're not going to do anything. Everything's cool. Meanwhile, like I said, we're steaming kind of full speed ahead for off the coast of Afghanistan.
Can you talk us through that first deployment, what you end up doing?
Yeah, it was like I said, I seem to fall into either good luck or bad luck. I don't know, but generally it's wound up good. So we get ashore at a place called Camp Rhino, which was kind of the first southern foothold that we had in Afghanistan. It was you could fly there, but it was a kind of all that you could do in air refueling and things like that to get there. There was an airfield that was in disrepair, but once they got that up and running, they were able to bring in fixed wing aircraft, so C-130s, C-5s, or C-17s anyway. Um, but it took like constant work to make sure that it stayed hard enough to land aircraft loaded down as they were. So we get there, we set up, and the first mission we got sent out on, my platoon, was to do and we were at this point, the Army SF was riding their horses up in the hills, and they had been there earlier than we were, but we were about 150 miles outside of Kandahar. So I got tasked with, hey, take your guys, drive through the desert, find a route to get us to Kandahar, staying off the main roads, and uh, we'll follow along behind in a couple of days, and we'll find bad guys, I guess. So,
John, real quick, if I can ask, is that kind of one of those missions for recon, which is like get out ahead, scout, like get the route, find out where like weak points are, where the enemy might be. That's
yeah,
part of that mission set.
absolutely. That's kind of like our bread and butter. So a route reconnaissance. Unfortunately we didn't have a lot of vehicles, so we had to like borrow some other units vehicles. We had a couple of Mercedes G wagons, which are cool, great vehicles, but can't carry a lot. So we had a couple of those. We had some Humvees, and we took off in probably like a 6 vehicle convoy with our whole almost 30-man platoon. Kind of driving through the night. And it's a lot of towing people out, a lot of getting stuck, a lot of trying to find your way through wadis and coming back and going around obstacles and things like that. But we eventually made our way up to what is Highway 1, it's really the big main road in Afghanistan. It kind of runs the loop from Kandahar up around Lashkar to Kabul, and it didn't at that time, but it does now. But got up there, brought up a big chunk, not the entire Marine Expeditionary Unit, but a quite a big chunk. And then we just started kind of working from there. So they would send us out at night to try to find Taliban. We were unsuccessful for a few nights, going off a lot of kind of bad overhead imagery. Like maybe these are some camouflage nets, or maybe this is a satellite dish, and it's a rock, it's a bush. So eventually, and it was General Mattis was in charge at this point. So he had, Mad Dog had been sent to kind of make things happen. So he was getting antsy. He was like, hey, we need to do something. We need to make something happen. So they asked me at this point. I had half of my platoon had returned to the fob where we were staying. I had half of my guys, and they said, hey, what we'd like you to do is go up to this highway, look for vehicles coming down the road, and we want to interdict them, basically. Kind of long story short, we wound up, the challenge with that obviously is you can't just if you just want to shoot vehicles, then you could do that with a bomb. You could do that with a machine gun, but if you need to identify that they're good guys or bad guys, or not bad guys at least, then you've got to stop it. You've got to see who you're dealing with. So we set a concertina wire obstacle across the road, marked it with chem lights, so it was obvious. Set back off the road in our vehicle, and I talked to the air that was overhead, and this was December 8th, the 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, which was cool. They let me know that a vehicle had left Kandahar, and then behind it, two large vehicles. Later we were able to figure out that one of them was like a kind of a 5-ton, military truck. One of them was a school bus, and in the lead was a Toyota dual cab pickup. Right. So, but that's really all the fidelity that we could get. So they're getting closer, and they're getting closer, and I'm joking with my guys. I'm like, and it's cold as shit. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, we were not incredibly well outfitted because we hadn't intended to wind up there. But, luckily I had told my guys, hey, I know we're probably going to be going to hot places. You will bring some cold weather stuff. But it was in the single digits or below. And, we're sitting there trying to stay warm and joking. And I'm like, man, I've been in the Marine Corps now for 14 years. I was told in boot camp that I would see like combat within my first enlistment. And I'm like a bullet repellent, I'm like, I wouldn't worry too much. I'm like, watch this. These three vehicles are going to pull up, and it's going to be like a nun and a bunch of school children or whatever. So as they start getting closer to us, talking with the aircraft, the two larger vehicles pulled off into the desert and let the other vehicle go on ahead. And they had kind of done this a couple of times, right, to just kind of scout the route. Eventually this pickup, goes by us. It sees the chem lights on the concertina wire, slows a little bit, and then just says fuck it and barrels it. Which is not a good idea. If you have a vehicle and you see concertina wire, don't drive into it because you're not going very far. So we pulled, jumped up on the road behind them, kind of like we're, cops. And I will never forget, because it was so cold. There was the bed of the truck was packed with boxes and crates and things, but there were three guys sitting like almost at the tailgate looking right at me. Two of them were younger guys, the ones on either side, and they all had weapons, you could tell, but the two of them were bundled in blankets and had the weapon like bundled up. The third guy's this big white beard in the middle, and he had his hands on his weapon, and his weapon was out, and you knew his hands were cold as shit. But he wasn't his first rodeo, right? He'd been through this before. So, they're trying to figure out what's going on. I jump out of the front seat of the vehicle, start like yelling at them to put their weapons down, and they decide not to do that. So we get into a shootout from 10 feet away. They're piling out, and they had stuffed. It was like a clown car. The cab and the rear cab of the truck must have had 8 or 10, little thin Taliban in it. So they're trying to pile up, but they're getting stuck in the concertina wire. They're, trying to shoot. We're shooting them. And then like out of nowhere, a big burst of flame erupts from the bed of the truck. Right. So our gunfire had ignited some stuff. And that takes off quickly. So before you know it, this whole truck is engulfed in flames. So we start kind of bounding back, and then an RPG launches like almost like straight at us. I'm like, fuck, how can anybody still be alive, in this fucking inferno, and think about firing an RPG. But then what we realized, that one I think had actually been in a launcher, so when it cooked off, it had some it followed a flight path. The others were then started shooting off. Last night reminded me, our neighbor kids, like the RPG warheads were they weren't arming, so they really weren't a danger, but they were just spinning, spiraling off as this whole truck is cooking off. Rounds are flying by, and so that was that was kind of the way Afghanistan kicked off for us. And then we called in air on the other two vehicles, and we wiped out 150 Taliban in kind of a pretty quick swoop.
So, I mean, also just for people listening, as you referenced your neighbor last night was 4th of July. So these are
Yes.
fireworks, not RPGs going up, even though you do live close to Camp Lejeune.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I mean, this is a large engagement. Your first time really having to do this, it sounds like after 14 years. Is this all the training that's gone into you and your platoon at that point? Is this how you train? Like this is what you expected and it worked effectively?
Yeah, that was the thing. And I talk about this a lot in the book. And I've like that, this episode kind of clicked the switch on me that I'm like, man, I had classes, I talked to people, I'd read things where they kind of talk about, what happens when you get into a fight or flight situation, not necessarily being shot at, but certainly, being shot at. A lot of the information that we had available to us at that point came from like the FBI and shootouts that police officers have been into. Um, One of the things I had heard about, was like uh, a couple of things. Perceptual narrowing, where you
Mhm.
you kind of feel like you're looking through a toilet paper tube, right? You can't see anything outside of the immediate threat. There's a thing called auditory exclusion, where things are not loud. Like the rifle fire was like, we didn't have earplugs in. Obviously, the rifle fire was, you almost couldn't hear it. And then time distortion, which is was the coolest to me. I mean, I think it really, the whole situation unfolded. I think the whole firefight was over in a couple of minutes, but it seemed like an hour, right? It just seemed like everything was moving so slowly, and I was processing much more rapidly. It's like the guy in the X-Men who's like really, really fast, while everybody
Yeah.
else he's so fast that everything else is slow.
Hmm.
And so I sat down. I was like kind of blown away by this recognition that, hey, all of these things I'd read about or heard about were true. Um, so the next day after we got some sleep, I took each guy, off, sat down and like, went through and took notes. I'm like, hey man, so what was it like for you? What did you experience? And almost to a man, they had experienced all the same things. We had one guy who kind of the opposite. He was felt that things were moving really, really fast. Right. And so that was, but he was, the same guy in later gunfights was, it wasn't an issue with him. It was just kind of the way he experienced things. But so it was that, I mean, that led to, I mean, half the books on the, behind me are trying to like kind of figure that out and figure out how we
Yeah.
can better train guys for that, how we can, use that to improve, training techniques, improve, the way we, prepare Marines for combat.
That's fascinating that you took the time to do that, John. What made you sit down with each of these guys? I think it's brilliant. Did it come from somebody else did this with you once after training? Did you read about this?
No, I was so blown away the fact that that I had read these reports from the FBI, who obviously did that after officer involved shootings, where they would sit down and they were presenting kind of statistics that, hey, 45% of people experience this, some people experience
Wow.
this. Um, so I was like, man, I need to at least try to get some of the stats. More not for any other reason than to have them for my own knowledge, so I could teach other people. But I said it was fascinating. I credit, all, 99% of it to the fact that we trained really hard.
Yeah.
We tr- kind of live by the mantras: the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. You don't rise to the occasion, you default to your level of training, which is something that Colonel Coates like gonna beat into our heads on a daily basis.
Hmm.
So that doing the right things and training were something I was raised to do, and you know consequently passed on, hopefully, to the guys behind me.
And no casualties in this first engagement.
No, not no. We wound up.
Wow.
We found there was in the Humvee that I was in. That was behind the guys. We found a bullet hole in the in the windshield that it would have the round going through it would have just missed the driver who we left in there in the vehicle during the assault. But yeah, that was as close as it came. There were, later on, obviously, I mean, later on in the next several days, there were guys that hit some IEDs and some explosions. Not my guys, but we did take some casualties in Kandahar.
What how long was that first deployment?
It was 7 months, but we were pretty rapidly back on the ships in January. So we had kind of been there through portions of November, December, January. The Marine Corps sent the next Marine Expeditionary Unit, and we did a turnover with them, and they kind of picked up where we left off in Kandahar.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with John. What a great guy, Marine American. I think this book is going to get a lot of traction and be of great interest to people who listen to this show in particular. The history of the Raiders and standing up of MARSOC. We've heard people on this show, Lilley, Ackerman, and a whole host of others who are part of that unit and trying to make it what it became today on the early end. So hearing what it was like in the pressure and making sure it succeeded. And if you can imagine that kind of pressure in the Marine Corps, the history it has and that no-fail mentality, it's pretty special. So glad we had him on. Do check out his book. And with that, we got a couple listener comments I wanted to share. First is, actually they're both Apple Podcast 5-star reviews. First is Kentucky Girl 35. It says, love this podcast. I'm not a veteran, but I have friends and family that served. Such an amazing podcast that highlights what our heroes do for this country, the many sacrifices that not only they make, but their loved ones as well. Don't forget their brothers and sisters that serve. Thank you for making a great podcast. It's funny because I was just explaining to someone the other day, they asked why I started this, and I couldn't have put it better myself. It really is about highlighting what they've done and a lot of the sacrifices that they make, but also from their families. So really appreciate that comment. It means a lot to me. And the next is from Thumper93436. Says, what an outstanding show. The guests are consistently interesting, knowledgeable, and entertaining. He does a great job of bringing out their story in a way that's very thorough, and I appreciate this. Very listenable. It's usually my first stop of the day to see if there's a new show available. Preparation for each show is apparent. Also, the skill of a great interrogator combined with the ability to make these shows exceptionally entertaining and informative. So I'm glad to hear that my CIA training has not gone to waste as an interrogator, that I can still bring out something of interest in folks. Now, but I do genuinely really appreciate you taking the time to stop whatever it is you're doing in the day and leave that comment. It helps the show. It also just helps me keep going, which is great. So I just have to say a huge thank you. And wherever you all are in the world, I hope you are doing well, and weekday, weekend, wherever you're at, that you have a great rest of your day. And as always, stay safe.